Good afternoon, and thank you for joining the webinar, Hiring in a Candidate-Driven Market. We are going to have a lot to cover today, so embrace yourself. You will get a lot of useful tips, data, get to see some cool things in the next hour. A few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. We will send the attendees today the recording sometime later this week or early next week. We are also having a poll throughout the webinar, and we are giving away virtual career fair technology to one lucky poll candidate. So feel free to take the poll throughout the webinar for a chance for your company to get that technology. We're going to talk today about how the recruiting climate has changed and what's the current climate, what is driving the candidate-driven market, and some about the competition. We're going to talk a little bit about today's job seeker and how that varies by demographic. And then really talking about culture fit and the candidate experience. We're going to compare some of the latest recruiting technologies, talk about some of the pros and cons and what's right for your company, and really dive into how to narrow your hiring funnel, how to look at your hiring process differently, and still embracing that human touch with some technology. We're going to talk about live video interviews, how to get started if you're not doing that today, what are some tips for training and implementation, as well as virtual career fairs, and talking about really diving into some technology, kind of showing you a few tricks of the trade here. So I'm going to get started and talk a little bit of how the recruiting game has changed. We've done a lot of kind of podcasts and videos recently, really talking about the recruiting climate and really going from the paper and manual process, 10, 15 years ago, and really how that changed over time of being social and web. And really, the role of kind of what we used to call headhunters, to how that recruiting has changed today. We had an influx here of kind of mobile driven and automation in the last few years. Sites for reviewing candidate experience and what it's like to work for a company have popped up more and more with sites like Glassdoor and others that candidates are really looking at and studying before they're doing interviews. Pre-recorded video interviews have been around for several years. We've had, thousands of job boards and mobile apps pop up. And really what we're seeing now and what we're seeing kind of in the future, if you look at any of the kind of trends, is really about how candidates are driving the experience and what that really means, how the role of the recruiter has changed to really be about building those relationships, building those personalized one-to-one relationships to really get that employee over your competition, and how that role of recruiter has really transitioned to more of a marketing role. And, there's been a lot of controversy of, should HR have marketing within their organization? So we'll talk about that. So looking at a little bit of the recruiting climate, 86% of recruiters think that the labor market is candidate driven. And so what is your organization really doing about that? And do your hiring processes and communications with candidate really reflect that? We've been kind of at this all-time low of the unemployment rate. And, in specific industries like healthcare and transportation and legal and some other areas that's highly competitive, the unemployment rate is even lower, especially in technology as well. And over the next, 5 or 6 years, there's going to be over almost 10 million open jobs. And, the competition is already fierce with 6.6 million current job openings right now, that you really have to figure out how to make your company stand out, how to make your job stand out in that clutter to create that competitive advantage. So you've probably heard a ton about, the millennials in the workforce and how that is today but really looking about, what are the different demographics looking for, and how that relates to what you're doing. Culture fit, you've probably heard that a million times, being very critical. 60% of recruiters think that is a critical factor. 50% of that stems employee engagement once you do hire somebody. And looking at this graph over here, this chart, millennials are going to make up 75% of the workforce by 2025. So, some recruiters, it's very controversial of, do you recruit and communicate differently for millennials versus a Gen Z or a baby boomer? And regardless of what your, thought process is on that is, that is going to be your recruiters. Those will be your HR people. Those are going to be the people you're talking to. And so really understanding, that demographic is very much about career advancement, very much about work-life balance and culture fit. So they're interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them, and they want that personal, human, one-to-one connection. Where Gen Z, who's already in the workforce, and if you're a restaurant, retailer, outsourcer on the webinar, you're probably seeing a lot of Gen Zs in your hiring process, and you're going to see a lot more. This is the first generation that's going to be, the highest, most likely generation to go straight into the workforce. They've seen the education debt of the millennials and are bypassing college and going straight into the workforce and really establishing their trade. And so you're going to see a lot more of that demographic, and that demographic kind of bypassed the millennials with, they are a mobile and tablet generation. They are a face-to-face. They actually do FaceTime more than they make phone calls and or text message. So they are a video first demographic. So what do candidates really want? What do they want in the job? What do they want in the interactions? 54% of candidates, convenience is a big thing. And the reason convenience is so big is, we live in this new environment where, with a push of a button, we can pretty much get anything delivered, same day, within a couple of days, and everything is around convenience. In addition to that, 73% of job seekers, have a current position. They don't really have that time to go look for a new job, a new career. They're open to opportunities. They're open to making a move. They could be paycheck to paycheck. They can't take time off, whatever it may be. They're not actively looking. So, if you're a recruiter and you're trying to build that talent network, these are folks that you want to be proactively reaching out to and proactively communicating with, that, you're in the right time at the right place, and that you're able to interview, meet, talk, whatever it may be with them that may not be during their work hours. And so really need to be flexible in that regard. One thing that's also really interesting is that 80% of people would take one job over another if they had formed a personal relationship during that interview process. So we're going to talk a little bit more about chatbots and human connections later, but there's a lot of situations in a lot of industries, talk to a lot of companies on a daily basis where, they're seeing big no-show rates and folks showing up for interviews, no-show rates on training. They have people that accept job offers that they just never hear back from, or they don't show. I was talking to somebody the other day, out in the technology field in California, where candidates are accepting 3 or 4 job offers and really just waiting to see who they have the best relationship with to take it. So it's not necessarily about money. It's, not necessarily about anything that you have control over, but what you do have control over is building a relationship during that process, having that open communication so that you're able to really sense that candidate and have them, want to work with you, want to work for you during that process. So a lot of companies that are really getting focused on retention, on employees, and on culture are hiring folks that are in charge of the candidate experience. And it's no different than the customer experience. It's starting to get very similar emphasis in that regard. And 97% of candidates, are referring other candidates if they've had a positive experience. And not only that, it's helping with, potential revenue of that company. If you're a consumer-facing brand, how that candidate is treated during that interview process will determine if they stay buying your product, if they become a new customer, or if they, stop being a customer. So it not only has emphasis on, just the job side of things, but also can have a direct impact on revenue. Speaking of culture fit over here, 87% of executives say that culture is very important to their business. More and more as we have different demographics in workplace and we have a culture fit of how, what is your, mission for the company, the type of culture and atmosphere. It's very important that that is discussed during the interview process, that culture fit conversation is part of your interview questions. And candidates will be asking you about it, especially if they're a millennial or Gen Z, as well as you should be discussing that with them up front to help your retention once that hire is made. Now, the cost of a negative experience. So, if you're an executive on the phone and you have recruiters reporting to you, it's very important that, that hiring process changes and that you're looking at negative reviews. Most companies, aren't willing to accept, reviews on Glassdoor or other sites that it's just a disgruntled employee. And while that's definitely the case, in a lot of regards, it's what you really do and how you're surveying your candidates during the hiring process, the good ones, the bad ones, and using that instantly so it doesn't end up 6 months, 8 months later that you're sitting on a bunch of negative reviews. It's proven that there were some recent stats that came out recently that before a candidate interviews with the company, they read on average of 6 reviews. And it takes 1 negative review, it takes 7 positive reviews to outweigh that. So you're kind of already in the black there if you've got a bunch of negative reviews. And so during that hiring process, people are going and filling out experience surveys and so forth, and 60% have reported a negative experience. And so that's really going to, with all the social media and the digital world that we live in, 72% of those folks are going to share that experience. And so that can have a trickle effect on if you're running into issues with getting candidates and so forth. Some interesting things of how that really affects your bottom line. 80% of turnover is due to bad hiring decisions. So when you look at, and we're going to talk about narrowing that hiring funnel in a minute, when you hear that, you have retention issues, and when you hear that folks are leaving and hiring managers are upset about employees, really start back at the basics and look at that hiring process and how you're recruiting, and are you asking the right questions from that standpoint. And a bad hire can cost you on average $25,000. Now, if you're hiring, higher salary people, this is significantly higher. And if you're hiring entry level, it's probably around this or a little high from that standpoint. But you should know what your bad hire is costing you to justify looking at that process. So I want to talk a little bit about recruiting and some comparisons of some technology. There's probably, I know Emily just pushed a poll to you guys of kind of what you're using today. And we get the questions a lot of, our hiring process is different, or this is how we hire, and, what technologies should we be using? Should we be, using chatbots for hiring or recruiting? Should we be using, or we already use today, pre-recorded? And what's the difference between pre-recorded and live? And so this really kind of breaks it down. And so, it's not a one size fits all. A lot of companies are using multiple of these, none of these. And so, chatbots, we had a podcast last week. If you want to hear more on some recruiting executives' comments on that. But chatbots are being used in its kind of infancy phase from an HR perspective. Some companies are using it purely for screener questions and to ask really basic questions for very entry-level positions. So it could be, do you have a criminal background? Can you work this shift? This is kind of the hourly range, just some really basic kind of screener questions. Where most folks in HR are using chatbots is really on their application pages. Some companies are seeing 90+% abandonment rate on online applications. A lot of that has to do with, folks spent a lot of time putting together the resume, then you're asking them the same exact questions. And so folks are really using that to try to get that abandonment rate down. There's not a lot being used for actual interviewing. And so, it's from a candidate experience standpoint, it's very low. You're not going to impact candidate experience. I think everybody's savvy enough and know they're talking to, AI or a robot. I don't think you're fooling many people to think that, there's a live person on the other end of the line. My guest on my podcast last week talked about, the overuse of chatbots and how people are just instantly closing them down because, everybody's putting them on their website. And it's really not going to help you. It's, very low on the ROI and the reduction of fill time. So you should be thinking about that really, around those buckets if you're hiring a lot of entry-level folks and you want to do some screeners, or if you have a very high abandonment rate on your application page. A lot of people get really confused with what is the difference between a pre-recorded interview and a live one. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that before I go through the chart. Number one, pre-recorded has been around for years. It is, you might be doing it today. You're sending whatever platform you may be using. You're either sending your candidates, all of your candidates, or select candidates to basically go do a video assessment. And you've pre-recorded, 4 or 5 questions in a system, and they're going to either from their phone or their computer, they're going to be timed, they're going to, record their answer, and, you're going to sift through those. Live is no different than, if somebody was sitting in front of you at your desk. You're going to either, through an automated fashion, promote some type of career fair, job fair, and have a bunch of candidates come in, or you're going to literally, after you received an application or a resume, you're going to send them a link and, connect with them at a certain scheduled time to interview them live as if they were sitting in front of you. And so from a pre-recorded standpoint, if you've got, a bunch of entry-level positions and you need to do some kind of mass screening, a lot of people are using this as interest level. So, if I email out or respond to candidates that have submitted resumes and I want to see, how interested or how really bad do they want this job, I may use that as a screener to see who actually records a video. And then, from a mass, kind of screening perspective, there's a lot of question on, does it creating bias? And so around that standpoint, if you have a hiring manager or a recruiter that's looking at a thumbnail picture of 100 videos, there's a lot of executives that have implemented this, that have stopped using it for the very fact of, a lot of people aren't even getting their videos watched because there's a lot of cherry picking going on based on preview kind of thumbnails. And so if you're using it, or if you're thinking about using it, it's definitely one consideration you want to think about. Next, on the candidate experience side, only 9% of candidates said that they preferred pre-recorded videos. where 34% was live and 57% was a live video interview, sorry, and 34% was an in-person. The reason is if you look at, feedback from the pre-recorded apps and you look at some of the feedback, if you're doing it, you may have received, a lot of candidates feel like they're talking into a box. They feel like there's, no way to go back and forth or really explain some answers, especially when you're dealing with millennials or Gen Zs. You may be doing a grit hire. They might not have, a very stacked resume, and they want to show you those traits. The other thing in that regard, when you're looking at the candidate experience, a lot of candidates from a culture fit standpoint feel like, if you don't have time to talk to me, but you have time to sift through all these video interviews, that may not be a company that I want to work for, that's not making time for that. It can reduce cost, obviously, because you can sift through a lot of videos in a quick amount of time if you're doing it and you have the right process in place, but it can't eliminate an in-person interview. So there's got to be a follow-up live video interview post that pre-recorded, or you got to do a phone screen or bring them in. So when you look at a hiring funnel, you're not really reducing significant amount here. You're reducing kind of one phase of that. So, it's kind of low to medium on the fill time reduction and low to medium on the ROI. On the live video interview side, this can be used across, kind of any job level and demographic. So I like to use the phrase white collar, blue collar, any collar. So regardless if you're, you're a hospital and you're interviewing for doctors, and, they're all across the US and you want to try to save money on bringing folks in, or if you're, interviewing, customer service agents, or restaurant employees, it doesn't really matter. You can really start to develop a personalized relationship. There's nothing that replaces that face to face. You get a good read of the person. You can really ask those follow-up questions. And so the candidate experience is really high. If you look at a lot of candidates that are, actively in the market and doing interviews, they won't remember a company that they did a phone interview with. They won't remember a hiring manager or recruiter's name. But if you ask them about the video interview, they remember the company, the person's name, what they look like. Sometimes they remember, background of what was on their desk. And so creating those impressions really help from a competitive advantage standpoint. We have a lot of clients that are now eliminating that in-person interview. So folks that are in highly competitive markets, logistics, manufacturing, call center outsourcing, retail, transportation, a lot of those positions where, if you do a video interview and you want them to come in next week for an in-person interview, that person's going to take, the next job. They're hourly, paycheck to paycheck. They don't have time to wait. And so if you've got, issues in your hiring funnel that you need to make that one video interview hire, live video interviews will definitely help with that. On fill rate, it's very high. It really depends on your hiring funnel. We say 7 to 21 days it can reduce. On average, I say it was 14. And the ROI is really high. So most folks using live video interviews, I can't speak for other platforms, but with ours, it's about 2.6 candidates per year is the ROI. So if you're interviewing and hiring more than, a few folks a year, you'll have a positive ROI on putting it into your funnel. So just having some candid candidates and managers kind of weigh in on the difference of pre-recorded and live. On pre-recorded side, again, not learning anything about the culture of the company doesn't allow the candidate to really ask any questions. It's kind of one way. They really can't showcase. On the recruiter side, it's not eliminating interviews. It's adding to the process. So a lot of hiring managers and recruiting will say that it takes them longer to sift through them than to just kind of conduct them. And on the live video interview side, back to my point earlier, is, really remembering the company, creating that lasting impression. And then on the hiring side, how much quicker you can do the video side and really getting things that you're going to miss on the resume. So we probably see, if you're looking at our phone interviews, the video interviews are much faster, 3 times. So you'll probably see on average those 20 and 24 minutes from that standpoint. So on narrowing the hiring funnel, really, we have an infographic that really gets into a lot of details from this standpoint. Of everyone's hiring process is a little bit different, but you probably have these kind of 3 buckets on kind of marketing, capturing the candidates, bringing them into the funnel. And really, as fast as you can get the video interviews in that process, you can reduce the fill rate. But really marketing the video interviews as a competitive advantage. Most recruiters and hiring managers know where good candidates are coming from and their competitors, and being able to market and have your recruiters reach out to those folks and say that they can do a video interview without having to take off work. Maybe it's at their lunch break, maybe it's after hours, whatever it may be, is a big competitive advantage to get those folks, again, those 73% of folks that are interested in a new career, a new job, but can't take off work. On the screening side, 3 to 6 times faster if you replace the phone screen with a video screen. So, there's a lot of companies that have kind of older question assessments, online assessments, a whole series of interviews. Doing a video interview, live one, you can get, the same out of a 5-minute interview as you can a 200-person question. And so really getting that into the process, and not only for the recruiters, but for the hiring manager side too. So depending upon how your funnel is, how many interviews you actually do, getting that into the mix. And then the next is really that interview phase. And so again, if your process is you do a phone screen and then you bring it in to talk to a hiring manager, some folks you have to talk to multiple, figuring out where within that funnel that you can utilize the technology while still maintaining that candidate experience will really bring it in for you. The average cost per hire industry-wide is about $4,200. You probably know yours and know if it's greater than that or less than that. With live video interviews, it's an average savings about $1,800 per candidate. Again, that depends on your process. So I want to talk a little bit. We get the question a lot of, where do you really start with video interviews? We get a lot of questions from HR folks of, how do I get started? What do I have to do to train my folks? Do I have to change my interviews? So we have an infographic on this that goes out into more details, but really a couple of things. You want to make sure that, the folks that are going to be doing video interviews have a web camera, and that, the web RTC checker, what that really means is to make sure that, your current environment and computers work, or, if you have to buy $20 web cameras, whatever it may be, and making sure all that's good to go. Depending upon what industry you're in, especially in healthcare and financial services, things like that, you might have to work with your IT to get them to get you access, if you have your web cameras blocked, and security from that standpoint. You want to spend some time looking at your hiring process and what makes the most sense. So looking at where you're doing phone screens today, looking at if you're doing pre-recorded, when do you take that to live, or do you go straight live? And, do you start with your recruiters? Do you have certain hiring managers that hire certain positions? Do you go to one video hiring for certain roles? And do you incorporate video career fairs? And so looking at that, identifying the areas of opportunity. If you're going to do a virtual job fair, really kind of establishing the criteria there. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then training your folks, right? So being on video is no different than being in front of a candidate. We get questions a lot of, well, how do I train them to be on video? And really it's, the same training that you would before you put them in a candidate in an office or an interview room, but it is a little bit different than doing a phone screen. So really kind of buttoning that up. And then looking at, most companies have, an interview guide, an assessment, questions that have to be looking and see if those are needed from a video perspective versus phone, because you can tell a lot by mannerisms, by, enthusiasm, passion, things like that. And then for the live video interview platform that you would be using, most importantly, looking at the reporting, looking at the feedback, and really making it a process where you're constantly improving the process, making it better, taking that constructive feedback from the candidates, and really trying to realize, how to do things better. I'm going to talk a couple of slides here about virtual video career fairs, and then I'm going to show it live of how a virtual video career fair actually works. And so we get a lot of questions on companies that, you may participate in a college fair, you may participate in a career fair once a year or twice a year. There's many companies that, can't afford to go to them because they're expensive. So I want to talk a little bit about how to do a virtual video one and how that really works. Excuse me. So picking kind of a date and time that's really convenient for the working population. Could be at lunch, could be in the evening, weekends. Slides are out of order. And really figuring out how you're going to market and promote it. So whether it's on your job boards that you're using and promoting it there, whether it's if you're doing social or digital marketing to reach new candidates, reaching out to your existing employees and having them invite friends, referrals, kind of that feet on the street. And then determining which jobs you're going to have in that career fair, which positions, and then who's going to be on the interview and the hiring team. So you may have 4 or 5 jobs, and you may have different recruiters and different hiring managers for each of those jobs. And so kind of mapping that and figuring it out. And then obviously conducting the video job fair, which I'm going to show you in a second. And then after that, really capturing the feedback from your recruiters and hiring managers of who to take to kind of the next round, as well as the feedback from the candidates. Are they even interested in the position, which is critical, and I really want to talk about today. So talking about marketing and promoting a virtual video career fair, and this is really no different than promoting live video interviews into your kind of existing process, but reaching out to your talent network. So if you're using an applicant tracking system or whatever you're using, reaching out to the current candidates that you have and letting them know that you have this virtual video career fair coming up, letting them know what positions you'll be interviewing for, what time it is, and getting them kind of, pre-interested in the event and kind of having your email marketing correlate to that. A lot of companies that really struggle with campus recruiting, there's always campus administrators that are trying to place both interns, college graduates, and they're very open to virtual career fairs for their students. So it's a great way to reach out to your local universities, trade schools, anything in the area. If you're hiring Gen Zs, you can even reach out to the local high schools and really getting that promotion. This really doesn't cost you anything other than, manpower to reach out. Your career sites. So if you're doing job boards, if you have your own careers page on your website, getting it promoted there and also putting it on the job boards for every open position that you have that will be in there. You might have people that abandon your application, but they see the job fair and they want to attend. Social media campaigns. So if you're doing anything on your social, if you're doing any digital ads on attracting candidates, targeting your competitors, promoting it through there, especially on, your LinkedIn's, your Twitters, your Facebooks, things of that nature. And then sending out emails and communications and posting it with your current employees so they can tell their friends. If you have a referral program within your organization, you can obviously communicate that out for folks that attend the job fair or folks that get hired from the job fair. So it's very different than what you might think in regards to kind of the old school booth job fairs, but you can run these very cost effectively, get a lot of candidates quickly, and if you have any mass hiring that needs to be done, and do this regardless of geography, US, global, whatever it may be, with a centralized or team all over the country. So I'm going to stop here and come back to a couple of slides, but I'm going to switch over to the technology and I'm going to show you a couple of things. I want to first show you what it's like from the candidate side. And Sean's going to be the hiring manager for me. And so I want to show you how it works. So this is our website, and a lot of clients have a landing page for their career fairs, or they put it right off of their traditional website. But if you see down here in the bottom, this is our live video interview widget that can go on a landing page. It can go on your careers site. And when the job fair is happening, I come in here as a candidate. I'm going to put in my email address. And here are the job openings that are going to be for this particular career fair. And so I'm going to select customer service work from home because that's the one I'm interested in. And I'm going to hit interview now. And then on Sean's side, he's going to be the hiring manager. And it's going to go into a career fair queue for him to answer my video. I'm going to get little nice hold messaging here while he answers it. Hello. So, hello. Hi. So Sean's I'm right off of the website here. And so I'm not leaving your branded company website. And so I'm here. And as a candidate, I can make this larger. Hey, everybody. I can make this larger and do my full interview here. Now, when this is over and Sean is done interviewing me, when this is ended, I'm going to get my candidate survey. So this is customized. This is our survey here. And it says, how am I going to rate my overall candidate experience? And so I'm going to give it a 3. And I'm going to say, how interested are you in this position? I'm going to say I'm not interested. What was my impression of company and culture? And I'm going to say that it needed work. Now, Sean may rate me after the interview that I'm a top candidate, but you never get my feedback instantly that says I wasn't interested. And so you're going to be chasing me, trying to get me for an in-person interview, and I'm not interested. So I'm going to say the hours don't work for me and not a good culture. And I'm going to submit that. We typically see about an 82% completion rate on the candidate side. Now I'm going to switch over and I'm going to show you the hiring manager and recruiting side. And as you can see here, I've already got 2 people in my queue for the job fair. So I'm going to now play the role of the recruiter and hiring manager and show you this side. So I'm going to accept Casey here, who's interviewing for customer service. And he's going to pop in. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Casey. So Casey's coming in, and now I'm the hiring manager. And so I've got the candidate in this large window here. And as you can see, it's instant and it's all branded. Anything candidate facing is branded for the particular company that's doing the hiring or recruiting. So now I'm done interviewing Casey. I'm going to finish this. And now I have the survey for the hiring manager or the recruiter. So I'm going to rate Casey 5 stars. I'm going to say, yes, he's a great fit for this position. And did it eliminate an in-person interview? We typically do that question so you can figure out your ROI, but this can be customized to anything you want. And I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to say 5 years experience, was great in video, hired, starts 8:15. Maybe I didn't hire him. Maybe he goes to the next round, but you get the picture. So from here, I can see instantly down here in my history, I can see the actual, all the candidates, how long they were interviewed for. Most importantly, who was the recruiter or the hiring manager that interviewed them, and what position they came into. So what this really tells me that's great is I can say, for our customer service work from home position, I can then go do the reporting and analytics to say how many candidates we have, you know, what was my cost for candidates to come in, how many did we actually hire from there, what was the feedback. And if you go back here and you look at the one Sean and I did, I'm actually logged in as an administrator. I can see that Sean rated it 5 stars. He didn't rate the other questions. But I can see that the candidate here is not interested and they needed work. And so when I run this report and I look at all the candidates we need to follow up with, you know, this is probably not going to be a candidate, even though Sean rated me really high. It doesn't look like I'm interested in the position. So you may want to call this person and find out why, but you know, you're not going to spend a lot of time chasing this person if they're not interested in the position. Now, what it also does is gives you a lot of insight we'll talk into in the next minute. But what the virtual job fair allows you to do is instantly come in here and say which positions you want in the job fair, make them active for a particular job fair or inactive, and really market that. And so this could change on a daily basis, a weekly basis. You could have job fairs, you know, every week if you wanted to. And then in addition to that, every recruiter or hiring manager has this personalized code up here in the upper right-hand corner. So, and Sean really liked me and he wanted to follow up and schedule an interview with me for the hiring manager for next week. He could send me a link to the video. He could give me his individual recruiter code. And, you know, if you're using some type of scheduling today or whatever you're using for communication wise, incorporating that into the process to continue post the job fair to have that live video interview as a next step. So I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint. We're going to answer some questions. I've got a couple more quick things I want to show, and I still want to leave time. So the last thing here, there's a Q&A, a chat session and a Q&A that you guys will see. If you have any questions, feel free to start submitting them if you haven't already, and I'll start answering those questions. And lastly, one thing I want to talk about is the insights gleaned from live video interviews as well as the virtual career fairs. Number one, everybody has different styles, right? So recruiters have become a lot that they really have to start selling these positions. They have to start selling the company. They have to start really selling a lot of these positions because the market is so competitive. And so getting insights instantly from the candidate experience, Sean and I may be interviewing the same exact role but I might be getting feedback that you're not interested in the pay or the hours. But Sean's interviewing the same role and he's not getting that feedback. As a director or VP, I may want to go back and say, hey, Sean, what are you saying about that Carrie, is saying differently? And Sean may be positioning it as, hey, this is entry level starting hours, but you can, switch over and bid out another shift at a later date. And this is a career advancement opportunity. And he may be selling the role a lot better. And if I can get that feedback immediately and really impact, I can get more people into the funnel that are interested in that position. So that really helps from a video interview standpoint. The second one is when you're doing a career fair through video, really figuring out if you're posting multiple positions, really tying that back to your marketing and how many people you got for each particular position. What was the quality of the candidates? What was the quality of the feedback? And then really how many people you took to the next stage of the funnel will really help calculate your ROI. Given that you can run these video career fairs, for pennies on the dollar, it's very important that you get, as many people and do them as often as you want, that you can get that instantly into your pipeline to get more candidates and get them faster through the cycle, reducing your fill rate. Candidate experience. You're going to see that. You're going to see trends. It's going to help you really reduce chasing candidates. It's going to reduce, a lot of interview no-shows. Everybody gets hung up with candidates that they think are really good. They can't understand why they didn't come. And, candidates, especially millennials, don't feel comfortable giving that in-person feedback. So you'll see it on a survey, you'll see it instantly, and it'll help that process. Productivity and fill rate, it's depending upon kind of what level, you'll be able to see how many interviews each recruiter is actually doing, what roles, what's your average length of video interviews, and it'll give you some insights, and you'll be able to really correlate that back to how long it'll take you to fill roles and your reduction in fill rate. So it's very beneficial from that perspective. So I know we've covered a lot. We've got about 10 minutes left. I always try to leave time for questions. So I'm going to start taking questions. My contact information is here. If you have any questions post this webinar and you need to reach out, as I said earlier, we're going to be sharing the recording of this webinar. Also, we referenced some important infographics and white papers. We're going to be pushing here in a couple minutes. We've got a very in-depth white paper. It's about 30 plus pages. Hiring in a candidate-driven market. We're going to be pushing you the PDF of that here in a couple of minutes. Feel free to download that. And so you have that to share with your team or folks that couldn't make it today. So I'm going to take the first question. And this is really about the hiring funnel. And so it really wants to go about the hiring funnel of, where are the biggest buckets to reduce fill rate. And I would really say probably the biggest bucket to reduce fill rate is replacing the phone screen. And so depending upon how your hiring process is today, doing those phone screens will really eliminate a lot of candidates that may have sounded good on the phone, but you weren't able to really see them in person, see if they were a fit, especially if you're in a position where you have to put your employees in front of customers. Maybe you're a bank, maybe you're a hotel, maybe you have a position where, somebody's going to be in front of customers. You're able to see the person just as if they're in front of you, eliminating, kind of that awkward, they come in for an in-person interview and within the first 5 minutes they may not be a fit. In addition, you can really tell a lot through video about somebody's passion, somebody's emotions and mannerisms that you can't tell over the phone. So that's probably the biggest, I would say, elimination bucket. And then secondarily, the hiring managers. If you have a multi-step process, allowing the hiring managers to use it really frees up a lot of their productivity. Most hiring managers have a day job, and they're always never enough time in the day to do interviewing. And so if you can have them do video interviewing, and they can video 3 candidates for the same that they could do 1 phone screen, your operations folks, or wherever the hiring manager is coming out of, will really be happy that HR is freeing up time for them. So the next question we have is, what jobs or industries do you see the most positive reaction from candidates for the virtual job fairs? I would say if you're doing mass hiring entry level for anything, job fairs are definitely a great way to go. I would say if you're hiring, if you want to reach past the underemployed and the unemployed, and you want to get folks that are working, doing career fairs are a great way to do it. I would say restaurants, retail, call centers, outsourcing, cable, hospitality. We're seeing a lot of, especially with the rise in kind of this on-demand delivery, a lot of warehouse workers, whether it's, delivery, furniture, logistics, whatever it may be, a lot from that standpoint. That's very competitive. Healthcare, nurses, school districts, when you're hiring for your hourly workers and substitute teachers and things like that, any of those positions, anything where you can capture a lot of candidates, where you can try to reach your competitors, and that you can do job fairs from that perspective. The other one that's kind of interesting is interns, as well as we've got consulting companies and folks that are very active, banks that are very active, college recruiting. A lot of your college folks aren't going to the booths anymore. So if you can do video with them, or even talk to them prior to going on campus, it'll really help. Let's see. Can you create a local job fair where you can bring multiple companies in a virtual job fair world? Yeah, so, we offer the ability to, a lot of folks come to us and say, hey, you guys are really good at digital marketing. We don't have the marketing resources within our HR group to really market a job fair and reach candidates. Can you guys, do you guys do that, or do you know somebody that does? So and the answer is kind of twofold. Number one, if you want to do a big job fair and you need to hire a bunch of folks and you don't have the bench on your HR team, or your marketing team is focused on consumer type marketing, we're able to kind of help market that job fair. In addition to that, we host job fairs by city, where we'll bring in multiple companies that are using our technology and kind of have a virtual job fair that'll have multiple companies participate. And so that's another way to have a virtual job fair and get candidates from that standpoint, where you're not actually having to do the marketing yourself. Maybe you're doing some as well, but that will bring in candidates from that perspective. If you have any last minute questions, get them in. I've got one more question and then I'm going to close. The last question is really a couple of different questions about the technology and the reporting. And really, we talked a little bit about reporting. I didn't show all the reporting. I'm happy to schedule a separate call and show you the actual reporting. But the basic of it is, you're able to see the reporting, by candidate, by the individual recruiter or hiring manager, and really see and export that data out, whether that's to an ATS, or whether that you're not using one and you want to slice and dice it yourself, or you just want to see it in our reporting platform. It allows you to have all the metrics that you'd be looking for to really kind of measure the results that you'd be looking for. So for the person that asked that, I'm happy to show you that offline and show you that from the details. So we will be picking a winner from, if you answered the poll questions, we will be picking a winner and reaching out to the winner on who won the virtual career fair for your company. Emily is going to push the white paper right now. You should get a pop-up for that. If for some reason you don't, let us know and we'll get you a copy of that, and we'll email you the recording next week. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining the Hiring in a Candidate-Driven Market webinar. I hope it was informative, and have a great afternoon.